The following program contains adult language and themes and is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
Acutely conscious of time, I'm going to read two snippets from this nonfiction book. Both pieces were commissioned by Harper's Magazine and appeared in that magazine in radically attenuated form. The first essay is called Getting Away from Already Pretty Much Being Away from It All, and it was a piece about going to the Illinois State Fair in the summer of 1993. And this is pretty much just a dart thrown at this thing. It's a random bit. This was July 15th, 1993, 09:30 hours. Sun now a rampant, mid-90s, puddles and mud trying to evaporate into air that's already waterlogged. Every smell just hangs there. The general sensation is that of being in the middle of an armpit. I'm once again at the capacious McDonald's tent at the edge, Titanic inflatable clown presiding. They had a huge inflatable Ronald. There's a fair-sized crowd in the basketball bleachers at one side and rows of folding chairs at the other. It's the Illinois State Junior Baton Twirling Finals. A metal loudspeaker begins to emit disco, and little girls pour into the tent from all directions, twirling and gamboling in vivid costume. There's a symphony of zippers from the seats and stands as video cameras come out by the score, and I can tell it's pretty much just me and 1,000 parents. The Baroque classes and divisions, both team and solo, go from age 3, ital, to 16 with epithetic signifiers. For example, the 4-year-olds compose the sugar and spice division, and so on. I'm in a chair right up front, but still in the sun, right behind the competition's judges, introduced as varsity twirlers from the University of Kansas. They are 4 frosted blondes who smile a lot and blow huge grape bubbles. The twirler squads are all from different towns. Mount Vernon and Kankakee seem especially rich in twirlers. These are towns in Illinois. The twirler spandex costumes, differently colored for each team, are paint tight and really brief in the legs. The coaches are grim, tan, live-looking women, clearly twirlers once, on the far side of their glory now and very serious-looking, each with a clipboard and whistle. It's all a little like figure skating. The teams go into choreographed routines, each routine with a title and a designated disco or show tune, full of compulsory baton twirling maneuvers with highly technical names. A mom next to me is tracking scores on what looks almost like an astrology chart, and she is in no mood to explain anything to a novice baton watcher. The routines are wildly complex, and the loudspeaker's play-by-play is mostly in code. All I can determine for sure is that I've bumbled into what has to be the single most spectator-hazardous event at the fair. Missed batons go all over, whistling wickedly. The 3- and 4-year-olds aren't that dangerous, though they do spend most of their time picking up drop batons and trying to hustle back into place. The parents of especially fumble-prone twirlers howl in fury from the stands while the coaches chew gum grimly. But the littler girls don't have the arm strength to really endanger anybody. Although one of the judges does take a sugar and spices baton across the bridge of the nose and has to be helped from the tent. None of this is made up. But when the 7- and 8-year-olds hit the floor in spandex with epaulettes and officers' caps and batons over shoulders like M16s for a series of, quote, armed service medleys, errant batons start pinwheeling with real force into the tent's ceiling, sides, and crowd. I myself duck several times. A man just down the row takes one in the plexus and falls over in his chair with a horrid crack. The batons, one stray I picked up had regulation length embossed down the shaft, have white rubber stoppers on each end, but it's that dry, hard kind of rubber, and the batons themselves are not light. I don't think it's an accident that police nightsticks are also called service batons. Physically, even within same-age teams, there are marked incongruities in size and development. One 9-year-old is several heads taller than another, and they're trying to do an involved back-and-forth duet thing with just one baton, which ends up taking out a bulb in one of the tent's steel hanging lamps and showering part of the stands with glass. A lot of the younger twirlers look either anorexic or gravely ill. There are no fat baton twirlers. The enforcement of this no endomorph rule is probably entirely internal. A fat person would have to get exactly one look at himself in tight sequin spandex to abandon twirling ambitions for all time. Ironically, it's the botched maneuvers that allow one to see how baton twirling, which to me had always seemed sleight of handish and vaguely occult, how it works in terms of mechanics. Has there been a radical change in the volume? Hello. It seems to consist not in twirling so much as sort of spinning the baton on your knuckle while the fingers underneath work and writhe furiously for some reason, maybe supplying torque. Some serious kinetic force is coming from somewhere, clearly. A sort of attempted sidearm twirl sends a baton Xing out and hitting a big woman's kneecap with a ringing clang, and her husband puts his hand on her shoulder as she sits up very rigid and white, her mouth a little bloodless hyphen. A team of 10-year-olds from the ginger snap class have little cotton bunny tails on their costumes' bottoms and rigid papier-mâché ears, and they can do some serious twirling. A squad of 11-year-olds from Tawanda does an involved routine in tribute to Operation Desert Storm. To most of the acts, there's either a cutesy, ultra-feminine aspect or a stern, butch military one. There's little in between. Starting with the 12-year-olds, there is, I'm afraid, a frank sexuality that begins to get uncomfortable. You can already see some of the 16-year-olds out under the basketball hoop doing little warm-up twirls and splits, and they're disturbing enough to make one wish there was a copy of the state's criminal statutes handy and prominent. Also disturbing is that in an empty seat next to me is a gun, a rifle, very real-looking, with a white wood stock, which who knows whether it's really real or part of an upcoming martial routine or what, that's been sitting here ownerless ever since the competition started. Oddly, it's the cutesy feminine routines that result in the really serious casualties. A dad standing up near the stand's top with a Toshiba viewfinder to his eye takes a tomahawking baton directly in the groin. It was not funny to him. And falls forward onto somebody else eating a funnel cake, and they take out good bits of several rows below them, and there's an extended halt to the action, during which I decamp, steering way clear of the 16-year-olds on the basketball court, and as I clear the last row, yet another baton comes warping cruelly right over my shoulder, caroming off Big Ronald's inflated thigh.
One thing that happened is I got to go to a really good college, and I found out, and I found out that I was kind of smart. I just kind of off, if I can say, in high school, and had been kind of a jock and kind of a, we call them grits in the Midwest. And one of the things that I discovered was that I really liked to read, and I fell in with some friends, one of whom wanted to resuscitate a humor magazine, and so he and I started this humor magazine, and he was interested in doing creative writing, and he and I had a kind of odd competition going, and I thought if he could do it, I could do it. And so I started doing that fairly late in college and discovered that I really liked it. For most of my college career, I was supposed to go on and do like math or philosophy, which were the things I was really a good little nerd at in college. And then I'm trying to think. It's odd. I don't really think of myself that much as a writer. I think of this as kind of an experiment that's going okay right now, and we're going to have to see what happens. I decided to go to a graduate writing program, which I don't recommend to anybody, as a way of, in my family, you go to grad school. You know, it's like some families you go to medical school. So I go to grad school in this creative writing program, and while I'm there, this novel that I did in college gets bought. And I think once you've had something big get bought, then technically you're a writer. I think it fulfills the criteria in the dictionary. So I don't know really that I ever chose it. I, for a while in the late 80s, was going to go back to grad school in philosophy, which I guess was a way of thinking about getting out of this line of work. but I discovered I didn't really like that and I missed the writing.
Because that went so well and my total expenses were $24, Harper's claimed to reward me by sending me on an all-expenses-paid luxury Caribbean cruise. This cruise took place in March of 1995. It was done by Celebrity Cruise Lines, which is actually one of the more reputable cruise lines operating out of South Florida. What else to tell you? The name of the ship was the Zenith, which very quickly gets renamed the Nadir, which I don't claim is it's kind of an adolescent joke. But, another random bit. Celebrity Cruises' fiendish brochure does not lie or exaggerate, however, in the luxury department. Thus, I now confront the journalistic problem of not being sure how many examples I need to list in order to communicate the atmosphere of sybaritic and nearly insanity-producing pampering on board the MV Nadir. MV, it turns out, stands for motorized vessel. How about, for just one example, the very first day, right after sailing but before the North Sea weather hits, when I want to go out to Deck 10's port rail for some introductory vista gazing and thus decide I need some zinc oxide for my peel-prone nose. My zinc oxide is still in my big duffel bag, which at that point is piled with all Deck 10's other luggage in the little area between the 10-4 elevator and the 10-4 staircase, while little men in cadet blue celebrity jumpsuits, porters, entirely Lebanese this squad seemed to be, are cross-checking the luggage tags with the Nadir's passenger list lot numbers and organizing the luggage and taking it all up the port and starboard halls to people's cabins. Sorry, I get saliva issues when I'm nervous. But so I come out and spot my duffel among all this luggage, and I start to grab and haul it out of the towering pile of leather and nylon with the idea that I can just whisk the bag back to cabin 1009 myself and root through it and find my good old ZNO. And one of the porters sees me starting to grab the bag, and he dumps all 4 of the massive pieces of luggage he's staggering with and leaps to intercept me. At first, I'm afraid he thinks I'm some kind of baggage thief and wants to see my claim check or something. But it turns out what he wants is my duffel. He wants to carry it to 1009 for me. And I, who am about half again this poor herniated little guy's size, as is the duffel bag itself, protest politely, trying to be considerate, saying, "Don't fret, not a big deal, just need my good old ZNO." I indicate to the porter that I can see they have some sort of incredibly organized ordinal luggage dispersal system underway here, and that I don't mean to disrupt it or make him carry a lot number 7 bag before a lot number 2 bag or anything. And no, I'll just get the big old heavy weather-stained sucker out of here myself and give the little guy that much less work to do. And then a very strange argument indeed ensues, me versus the Lebanese porter, because it turns out I am putting this guy, who barely speaks English, in a terrible kind of sedulous service double bind, a paradox of pampering. Namely, the passenger's always right versus never let a passenger carry his own bag paradox. Clueless at the time about what this poor little man is going through, I wave off his high-pitched protests as mere servile courtesy, and I extract the duffel bag and lug it up the hall to 1009 myself and slather the old beak with zinc oxide and go outside to watch the coast of Florida recede cinematically a la Frank Conroy, which will not mean anything to you. Only later did I understand what I'd done. Only later did I learn that that little Lebanese Deck 10 porter had had his head just about chewed off by the Deck 10 head porter, also Lebanese, who'd had his own head chewed off by the Austrian chief steward, who'd apparently received confirmed reports that a Deck 10 passenger had been seen carrying his own luggage up the port hallway of Deck 10, and now demanded rolling Lebanese heads for this clear indication of porterly dereliction, and had reported the incident, as is apparently SOP, to an officer in the guest relations department, a Greek man with Revo shades and a walkie-talkie and officerial epaulets so complex I never did figure out what his rank was. And this high-ranking Greek guy actually came around to cabin 1009 after supper to apologize on behalf of practically the entire Celebrity shipping line and to assure me that ragged-necked Lebanese heads were even at that moment rolling down various corridors in piacular recompense for my having had to carry my own bag. And even though this Greek officer's English was in lots of ways better than mine, it took me no less than 10 minutes to express my horror and to claim responsibility and to detail the double bind I'd put the porter in, brandishing at relevant moments the actual tube of zinc oxide that had caused the whole snafu. 10 or more minutes of this before I could get enough of a promise from the Greek officer that various chewed-off heads would be reattached and employee records unbesmirched to feel comfortable enough to allow the officer to leave. And the whole incident was incredibly frazzling and angst-fraught and filled almost a whole Mead notebook and is here recounted in only its barest psychoskeletal outline. It is everywhere on the nadir you look, evidence of a determination to indulge the passenger in ways that go far beyond any halfway sane passenger's possible expectations. Here are some completely random examples. My cabin bathroom has plenty of fluffy, luxuriant towels, but when I go up to lie in the sun on the upper decks, I don't have to take any of my cabin's towels because the two upper deck sun areas have big carts loaded with even thicker and fluffier towels. These carts are stationed at convenient intervals along endless rows of gymnastically adjustable deck chairs that are themselves phenomenally fine deck chairs. Sturdy enough for even the portliest sunbather, but also narcoleptically comfortable, with heavy alloy skeletons over which is stretched some exotic material that combines canvas's quick-drying durability with cotton's absorbency and comfort. The material's precise composition is mysterious, but it's certainly a welcome step up from public pool's deck chair's surface of Kmartish plastic that sticks and produces farty suction noises whenever you shift your sweaty weight on it. And the Nadier's chair's material is not striated or cross-hatched in some web, but is a solid expanse stretched drum-tight over the frame so that you don't get those weird pink chair stripes on the side you're lying on. And each upper deck's carts are manned by a special squad of full-time towel guys, so that when you are well done on both sides and ready to quit and spring easily out of the deck chair, you don't have to pick up your towel and take it with you or even bus it into the cart's used towel slot, because a towel guy materializes the minute your fanny leaves the chair and removes your towel for you and deposits it in the slot. Then there's a paren. Actually, the towel guys are such overachievers about removing used towels that even if you get up for just a second to reapply zinc oxide, or gaze contemplatively out over the railing, often when you turn back around, your towel's gone and your deck chair is refolded to the uniform 45-degree at-rest angle, and you have to readjust your chair all over again and go to the cart to get a fresh, fluffy towel, of which, of course, there is admittedly not a short supply, close paren. Down in the five-star Caravel restaurant, the ship's restaurant, the waiter will not only bring you, for example, lobster, as well as seconds and even thirds on lobster, and bring them with methamphetaminic speed, but he'll also incline over you with gleaming claw cracker and surgical fork and actually dismantle the lobster for you, saving you the green, goopy work that's the only remotely rigorous thing about lobster. Plus, every public surface on the MV Nadir that isn't stainless steel or glass or varnished parquet or dense and good-smelling sauna-type wood is plush blue carpet that never naps and never has a chance to accumulate even one flecklet of lint, because jumpsuited third-world guys are always at it with Siemens AG high-suction vacuums. The elevators themselves are Euroglass and yellow steel and stainless steel and a kind of wood grain material that looks too shiny to be real wood but makes a sound when you thump it that's an awful lot like real wood. And there's a wood note. The many things on the Nadir that were wood grain but not real wood were such marvelous and painstaking imitations of wood that a lot of times it seemed like it would have been simpler and less expensive simply to have used real wood. And let's don't forget room service, which on a 7-night Caribbean luxury cruise is called cabin service. Cabin service is in addition to the 11 scheduled daily opportunities for public eating, and it's available 24/7, and it is free. All you have to do is hit extension 72 on the bedside phone, and 10 or 15 minutes later, a guy who wouldn't even dream of hitting you up for a gratuity appears with this tray. As a kind of semi-agoraphobe who spends massive amounts of time in my cabin, I come to have a really complex dependency/shame relationship with cabin service. Since finally getting around to reading the services directory and finding out about it on Monday night, I've ended up availing myself of cabin service every evening. More like twice an evening, to be honest, even though I find it extremely embarrassing to be calling up extension 72 asking to have even more rich food brought to me when there have already been 11 gourmet eating opportunities that day. There's a footnote about the 11. This is counting the midnight buffet, which tends to be a kind of lamely lavish theme/costume partyish thing with theme-related foods, Oriental, Caribbean, Tex-Mex, and which I plan in this essay to mostly skip, except to say that Tex-Mex night out by the pools featured what must have been a 7-foot-high ice sculpture of Pancho Villa that spent the whole party dripping steadily under the mammoth sombrero of Tibor, Table 64's beloved and extremely cool Hungarian waiter, whose contract forces him on Tex-Mex night to wear a serape and a straw sombrero with a 17-inch radius, and to dispense 4-alarm chili from a steam table placed right underneath an ice sculpture, and whose pink and bird-like face on occasions like this expressed a combination of mortification and dignity that seemed somehow to sum up the whole plight of post-war Eastern Europe. Return to text. Usually what I do about the shame thing is spread out my notebooks and Fielding's Guide to Worldwide Cruising 95 and pens and various materials all over the bed So when the cabin service guy appears at the door, he'll see all this literary material and figure I'm working really hard on something literary right here in the cabin, and have doubtless been too busy to have hit all the public meals, and am thus legitimately entitled to the indulgence of cabin service. Then there's a footnote exploring how little this guy possibly cares. But it's my experience with the cabin cleaning that's maybe the ultimate example of stress from a pampering so extravagant that it messes with your head. Previously there's been a tasteful and very non-harassment-ish thing about having a crush on the cabin steward. Who's female? Searing crush or no, the fact of the matter is I rarely even see 1009's cabin steward, the diaphanous and epicanthically doe-eyed Petra. But I have good reason to believe she sees me, because every time I leave good old cabin 1009 for more than half an hour, when I get back, it's totally cleaned and dusted down again and the towels replaced and the bathroom agleam. In a way, this is great. I am kind of a slob, and I'm in cabin 1009 a lot, and I also come and go a lot. And when I'm in here in 1009, I sit in bed and write in bed while eating fruit and generally mess up the bed. Not good to burp in a microphone. But then whenever I dart out and then come back, the bed is freshly made up and hospital cornered, and there's another mint-centered chocolate on the pillow. So I fully grant that mysterious invisible room cleaning is in a way great, every true slob's fantasy, somebody materializing and deslobbing your room and then totally dematerializing, like having a mom without the guilt. But there is also a creeping guilt here after a while, a deep accretive uneasiness that presents, at least in my own case, as a weird kind of pampering paranoia. Because after a couple days of this fabulous invisible room cleaning, I start to wonder how exactly Petra knows when I'm in 1009 and when I'm not. It's now that it occurs to me how rarely I ever see her. For a while I try experiments, like all of a sudden darting out into the 10-port hallway to see if I can see Petra hunched somewhere keeping track of who is decabining. Unfortunately, this is not made up either. And I scour the whole hallway and ceiling area for evidence of some kind of camera or monitor tracking movements outside the cabin doors. Zilch on both fronts. But then I realize that the mystery is even more complex than I'd first thought, because my cabin gets cleaned always and only during intervals where I'm gone more than half an hour. When I go out, how can Petra or her supervisors possibly know how long I'm going to be gone? I try leaving 1009 a couple times and then dashing back after 10 or 15 minutes to see whether I can catch Petra indelecto, but she's never there. I try making a truly ungodly mess in 1009 and then leaving and hiding somewhere on a lower deck and then dashing back after exactly 29 minutes. And again, when I come bursting through the door, there's no Petra and no cleaning. Then I leave the cabin with exactly the same expression and appurtenances as before, and this time stay hidden for 31 minutes and then haul ass back. And this time again, no sighting of Petra, but now 1009 is sterilized and gleaming. This is true. And there's a mint on the pillow's fresh new case. Know that I carefully scrutinize every inch of every surface I pass as I circle the deck during these little experiments. No cameras or motion sensors or anything in evidence anywhere that would explain how they know. And there's a quick footnote. The answer to why I don't just ask Petra how she does it is that Petra's English is extremely limited and primitive, and in fact I'm afraid my whole deep feeling of attraction and connection to Petra the Slovenian steward has been erected on the flimsy foundation of the only two English clauses she seems to know, one or the other of which clauses she uses in response to every statement, question, joke, or protestation of undying devotion. Is no problem, and you are a funny thing. So now for a while I theorize that somehow a special crewman is assigned to each passenger and follows that passenger at all times, using extremely sophisticated techniques of personal surveillance and reporting the passenger's movements and activities and projected time of return back to steward HQ or something. And so for about a day I tried taking extreme evasive actions, whirling suddenly to check behind me, popping around corners, darting in and out of gift shops via different doors, etc. Never one sign of anybody engaged in surveillance. I never develop even a plausible theory about how they do it. By the time I quit trying, I'm feeling half crazed, and my counter-surveillance measures are drawing frightened looks and even some temple tapping from 10 ports other cruisers. I submit that there's something deeply mind-fucking about the Type A service and pampering on the nadir, and that the manic invisible cabin cleaning provides the clearest example of what's creepy about it. There is no light shining, I'm okay. Because deep down, it's not really like having a mom. Guilt and nagging notwithstanding, A mom cleans up after you largely because she loves you. You are the point, the object of the cleaning somehow. On the nadir, though, once the novelty and convenience have worn off, I begin to see that the phenomenal cleaning really has nothing to do with me. And there's a paren. It's been particularly traumatic for me to realize that Petra is cleaning cabin 1009 so phenomenally well simply because she's under orders to do so. And thus, obviously, that she's not doing it for me or because she likes me or thinks I'm no problem or a funny thing. In fact, that she'd clean my cabin just as phenomenally well even if I were a dork. And maybe, conceivably, behind the smile does consider me a dork. In which case, what if, in fact, I really am a dork? I mean, if pampering and radical kindness don't seem motivated by affection and thus don't somehow affirm one or help assure one that one is not, finally, a dork, of what final and significant value is all this indulgence in cleaning, close paren. The feeling similar to the experience of being the guest in the home of somebody who does things like sneak in the morning and make your guest bed up for you while you're in the shower, and fold your dirty clothes or even launder them without being asked to, or who empties your ashtray after each cigarette you smoke, etc. For a while with a host like this it seems great, and you feel cared about and prized and affirmed and worthwhile, etc. But then after a while you begin to intuit that the host isn't acting out of regard or affection for you so much as simply going around obeying the imperatives of some personal neurosis having to do with domestic cleanliness and order. Which means that since the ultimate point and object of the cleaning isn't you but rather order, and since you're pretty obviously a source of disorder, it's going to be a relief for her when you leave. Meaning her incredible pampering of you is actually clear evidence that she does not want you around. The nadir doesn't have the scotch-guarded carpet or plastic-wrapped furniture of a true anal-type host like this, but the psychic aura is exactly the same, and so is the projected relief of getting out. Thanks a lot.